I've been in South Nashville, walking around a neighborhood, trying to see what is there, and I came across a community, the Nations Church. You could go to, I think it is thenations.church to follow on with the actual community that I'm talking about. And since this is in public domain, I'm going to refer to what is there. By parentheses, I should say I was not able to get an interview with anyone inside of the community. So anything that I might conclude or attributions I might make regarding this community called the Nations, which, by the way, I'm bringing some admiration for. Let me confess that bias. It is my own speculation, and all of the errors will be mine. There's a particular difficulty of someone as an outsider drawing conclusions about a process which I could no way understand from the inside. So I did want to make that part clear, but you can go to their site if you like and follow along with me. Now, how would you get the assignment done in light of the step 1 and step 2 I've given you? Step 1, we went to a restaurant and you saw a logic chain embodied for you. You saw them take the inputs of dough and human effort and the ingenuity that probably has a secret sauce inside of that dough of some kind, and a fulfillment system that included ways of raising the yeast in the bread and giving it time to rise as it moved up and down those conveyors, applying the change agent of heat and oils, a flipping machine, a glazing machine, and you saw it come out of the other end of the automated system. We even saw staff beginning to move around. When the machine had done its part, the humans had entered into the technical process by lifting things from machines based on the orders of customers. The sales team processed the exiting, and folks left with their output, a donut, a dozen donuts, 50 dozen donuts, what have you. When I was there that day, there were about 8 or 9 older gentlemen in a conversation, and I could hear I could overhear what they were saying, is that they were planning for the fall elections. These folks were of a particular political party, and they were trying to think through what they could do to activate that particular community politically and towards their persuasion. So the outputs are donuts and dough, which has been baked through their fulfillment system. The outcomes are the community comes together to do its life. The outcomes become the health effects from eating those donuts. The outputs become a historic outcomes become an historic, almost landmark-like restaurant that may convey something like stability to the community, or for others, that the community is still stuck in the past, depending on where the worldview and values inform interpretation. But that was step 1, and a lot of folks sent me messages saying, I got it. At least one person sent a message saying, I really got it, man. I'm on donuts and on a diet, and I love donuts and I'm on a diet, so stop with the logic model, Dr. West. Step 2, I went back to that community, walked around to see what I could see and hopefully find someone I could get some interpretations from. And on that day, you may recall, I couldn't get anyone to talk with because they were conducting a clinic to the community. They were conducting a local health care offering for a community whose resources appear to be strapped. Probably a lot of folks in that community would not have the insurances and the safety nets to make it through a day or through a week or through a month if illness came upon them. I couldn't find an interview because they were so busy doing their mission. I lost the day trying to get that interview, and I decided let's go take this approach. So if you want to turn your your web pointer to thenations.church. You'll be at their website in Nashville, Tennessee, thenations.church. And I'll use that as public domain and make some observations based on what they have said publicly about themselves. But first, where does the logic model come in? I've given you some documents called the Wilder Research. In that particular document, if you have not ordered it, hit pause right now, open it up, run through it, see the gifts which have been planted inside of it, and know that I'm not trying to play a game and I'm not trying to be tricky here. I've supplied you most of what you need to do your assignment in that document. Most of the questions which have come to me in the last 2 weeks of folks who are trying to make sense of what specifically I'm trying to get from this assignment have come at a time when they have yet looked at the resource that I've offered to answer those questions. So I need you in the documents which I've sought to supply, which I've supplied and have sought to answer the questions in advance through them. I'm expecting you to refer to those documents as your guides. These are my facial, visual, incarnational attempts to convey the value of these pieces. Okay. So how do they play into them? I want to read something from the first content page of the Wilder stuff. Page 2. The chapter begins with program theory and logic models, and they begin describing what they are. In the second cycle of their discussion, they talk about the if-then connection. If this, then that. Something is conditioned upon something else. And they give examples of what they would call program theory. It's their theory of change as to what they're trying to achieve through a program, through some particular sequence of activities, a program. It said program theories can be often captured in a series of if-then statements. If something is done with or for program participants, then something should change. If something is done, then something should change. One of the things I want us to footnote on that is most organizations are so conditioned to not expect change or transformation that this sounds like a startling statement. That we should expect something to change when we exert initiative. They provide samples of the if-then statements like this. If a certain set of resources, such as staff, equipment, materials are available, then the program can provide a certain set of activities or services for its participants. How about another one? If participants receive these services, then they experience specific changes in their knowledge, attitude, and skills. Another one. If individuals change their knowledge, attitudes, and skills, then they will change their behavior and usual practice. One more. If enough participants change their behavior and practice, then the program may have a broader impact on the families or friends or participants or on the community as a whole. If-then statements. You've been reading from assigned texts which were selected before I became the steward of the course, texts that I had to make sense of. How are these sequenced? What did the arranger of the syllabus intend for the learners in this class? So I did my dead level best to give it some sense of logic that the designer was talking about the kind of messiness and confusion wherever each person does what's right in their own eyes. The second cycle I noticed is that this was about motivations, that if you start in certain places, you're going to end up in certain places. But grounding these in Missio Dei gets you a different result or obligates you to a different result. The third phase became, what are some of the methodologies? And in this stage, I am proposing to you that becoming a professional stranger, being located, embodying what Frost and Hirsch would call a missional ecclesiology, in contrast to this program-driven or this attraction-driven ecclesiology, might be a standard that has arisen from the reading. You don't have to agree with Hirsch and Frost or West's extraction of that particular statement and converting it to a standard, but that's what I think. That's probably why my value system noticed that community on that corner, is because its billboard said things like, the nations were interested in it. You may recall from the 2 other visits that I was walking across street signs which were written in Arabic and written in Spanish and written in Ethiopian script, as well as English. It's fairly common all through that area. And a church called The Nations struck me as curious, peculiar. They drew me in because of my value system around a missional ecclesiology, which includes how the seed of Abraham is working its way through the nations. So they had my attention. But just because you label something as, hey, we're interested in you, we're the friendly kind of church, doesn't mean that people who come to take a sample of that are going to find you friendly. So I wanted to find out how does this actually work? So I began walking around and seeing what I could see, just working with the artifacts that are available in plain sight. And I gave you pictures of them so you can draw your own conclusions as well. I've now given you access to their public domain, and you can make sense of what you find there. But if I take a standard that lifts from my reading that says something like, let me read a quote. The incarnation provides us with the missional means by which the gospel can become a genuine part of a people group without damaging the innate cultural frameworks that provide that people group with a sense of meaning and history. Page 37. Having a real and abiding presence among a people group. Page 39. It requires a sending impulse rather than one of extraction. And finally, incarnational mission means that people will get to experience Jesus on the inside of their culture and their lives. Page 40. Okay, I have quoted from 2 or 3 pages from Hirsch and Frost. And I'm lifting from that an extraction that I'm going to call cares for people outside of their own 4 walls. Maybe that is a missional principle that matters to me and my theology, spirituality, in reading of the text. That is a standard. Now, I can take that standard and say, I wonder, this is West's standard. It's not the nations, the church's standard. This is Russell's standard that he discerned from his reading. It's not even from the Bible. This is my theologizing and my integration. So I take this standard and I say, I'm going to take this standard almost like a lens and see if it applies at that community that has a cross on it, and that community that has a cross on it, and that community. That's a standard that's inside of me no matter which culture I'm in, no matter which community I'm in. I have that standard that I have deduced from my reading it and become confirmed in it. Throughout this term, I have been asking you to engage the text. I've often been saying, make sure that you quote 2 citations at least. When you reply to someone, use 1 citation. Some of you are struggling with this assignment because you've not yet understood what I am asking you to do from a discipline point of view. And where those essays you have written do not include those things, you have a gap in your capacity to get this project done. You're going to have to go back and make sense of your books in a way that you deduce principles or standards that you would use as a standard to measure whether a community is missional or not from your point of view, not West's. It's not all going to be in Hirsch and Frost. It's spread throughout all of the books, all of the articles. I'm inviting you to have a demonstration of your integration by you lifting your standards. Well, how many do I have to have, West? Your standards. I might suggest to you no less than 7, probably no more than 12. Something that you could talk through in an interview at a coffee shop in a conversational way to determine where they're at. Well, how would I do it? I've suggested to you use a Likert scale. So using the standard call cares for people outside their four walls. That's what I'll call the standard. I'll say on a 1 to 10 scale, does the nation care, the group called the nations, care for people outside their four walls? On a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being they're totally awesome at it. 0, they're not even aware humans are outside of their four walls. Got me? So I walk up to the nations and I observe there. And you've seen the billboard. You decide where they're at on a 1 to 10. You've seen the coffee ground, the Common Grounds cafe that they have on a fairly busy, walkable street. You decide if that's about the inside or the outside. I haven't been inside. It could be a bunch of folks from their church just loving like hipster coffee or something like that. You have to decide. But on a 1 to 10 scale, I get to render a judgment to say, man, they got it going on, maybe at an 8. I could stand to see more of this or more of that. But I'm going to have to be the one that justifies where I place that number and why I put it there. Based on my theology, based on my reading, based on my spirituality, based on my denomination, based on my strategic sense, based on the prophetic situation that I sense that community's in. Okay, what do I do next? You do that over. Just rinse and repeat 7 times, 10 times, 12 times. But you take it now that you have created your audit. It's on your piece of paper. This is the lens that you use when you go to that country or that community or that congregation, that the thing that you think is seeking to be faithful to God, and you use it like an x-ray to determine where are they at on 1 to 10 scales and justify your marks based on your readings. So you go, you have the conversation with someone. I sought to get in a conversation with one of the elders in that community, or one of the participants or receivers of, and just luck of the draw, I could not make it work out in the time frame that we've needed to get something recorded and to you. However, if I was there, I would have begun to ask them my 7, 10, 12 questions. Let's say now the process is complete. I would go and take what they said to see if I could find evidences of what they said around their place. So let me look at some of the things that they said. I'm going to their website right now. Their actual name appears to be Christ for the Nations Church. Their front page, their connect page, for those who want to join and become a part of the thing, it says, please let us know if you have any questions about the Nations Church. If you'd like to know more about any of the ministry opportunities available, small groups, missional communities, that sounds like familiar language to me. Serving opportunities, I wonder if the serving's for the people on the inside or people on the outside. Or if you're just looking for a good Nashville burger, whoa. It says, we've got your back. Looking for a Nashville burger, that's not in the Bible. Maybe these are unfaithful people. Or maybe they are matching one of the standards that I just picked out of Hirsch and Frost fairly randomly, quite honestly. Maybe they're showing that they're not trying to do the extraction, but they're trying to make this relatable, not interrupt. If you're hungry, we're the kind of place where you find food. What else they have here? Their Sundays are starting at 10:20. What's the I'm new here say? Nothing quite remarkable there. Missions. Now this is very interesting. Excuse me. They apparently are one of the location spots to teach a course which has had about 30 or 40 years of influence, called the Perspectives course, Perspectives on the World Christian Movement. When people go through this 4-phase training process called the Perspectives, it usually leaves them a little bit wrecked, more disposed towards mission at home and abroad, and seeing themselves inside of the grand narrative. Many of the perspectives that inform my value system that has me teaching the very class we're teaching came from my exposure to the Perspectives course back in 1983. As I just came out of the Marine Corps and entered a ministry college, and someone had this extracurricular training experience available that I took advantage of. They've got, under that same page, a group, it looks like 2 or 3 families that now live in Portugal. Team Portugal. They've got Team Japan. So there's a group of friends that are involved with some sort of project in Japan. I see they're in front of American Airlines desk. These people are traveling. The Lubins head to Japan, it says. Naomi's in Guinea. So we have 3 members or initiatives from their own community that are actually in the global space under the heading of the Perspectives course. We've got some sermons there. We've got a blog. The first one from today's date says, "I quit." Legendary NFL coach Vince Lombardi was known for his motivational quips and quotes. Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. Goes on talking about some normal things. You'll be surprised that the next one's called Hot Donuts and a little crisis that he has on his way to Planet Fitness. I'll leave some of you to that. The next thing on the blog says God can be found in the strangest places. Interesting conversation that they're getting started. Let me hit on staff for a second. Lead pastor Ray McKelvey, Director of Children's Ministry Lisa Steele, the gathering coordinators. So we've got a team of about 4 leaders that are considered our staff and leaders. I'm going to hit connect. Under the connect section, I see our groups. Now look at what this says. Small groups are the integral part of the nation's church. We believe that having community to walk with you through the good times and the bad is very important. We have a variety of groups with different focuses. One is the Stonebrook group. The others is the Fields and Borens group. The others the Patterson Buckler and the Go and Grow. 4 different groups. Let's look at what some of these groups say about themselves. Stonebrook says, we exist to grow in our relationship with God while serving the refugee families of the Stonebrook apartment complex and showing them the love of Jesus. We meet every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Location varies, so keep in touch. We have a rotating schedule where we meet at Stonebrook Apartments. It gives it a place 3 times a month running our Awanas VBS type program with kids. Kids are always welcome to come hang, learn, play with us, so bring them out. Feel free to email us if you have questions. How about the next one, the Fields and the Borens? Come on over. Our group is committed to close-knit community, praying for the nations, intentionally living and leading others to Christ, ongoing discipleship, forever deepening our own relationships with God. We meet in Southeast Nashville on Thursday evening, 6:30, sharing a meal, family style, homemade deliciousness. We are currently being engaged and sharpened to walk together through Wayne Grudem's Christian Beliefs, 20 basics every Christian should know. Next one is the Pattersons. Our focus is to encourage and exhort and admonish one another to live lives true to the gospel, actively, intentionally sharing the gospel with those we interact with daily. We typically meet at so-and-so's house on such and such address. We're currently going through a video series about Alistair Begg on the fruit of the Spirit. We occasionally have fun nights. Okay. I have this standard called Cares for People on the Outside of the 4 walls. Taking just that single standard on a 1 to 10 scale without being able to confirm whether it's true, because I think that things are seldom as they appear to be until I have some evidence to believe otherwise, that these folks are outside of their 4 walls. They are inviting, they have their actual home addresses on the World Wide Web saying, come on over at this particular time. incarnational ecclesiology, the invitations we see on the billboards, the hospitality messages of seats and tables laid out with a cafe and the offer of one of the best burgers in Nashville, you know I'm intrigued. You know I'm intrigued. I'm just going to go ahead and give them a 7 or an 8 as an outsider, and it's non-confirmed, to illustrate for you the way the process might go. Now, what would I do with that inside of the paper? I would, if I've used 7 to 10 questions, for each of the responses that you get from that, I would host a conversation around the evidences that you saw to justify the number. So it may be standard, interview question, evidences that they point to and evidences that you found, and some discussion around Hirsch and Frost around that piece. Wrap that one up and move to the next standard. I hope you got that. Do that 7 to 10 times or 7 to 12 times or how many elements are on your audit, and you're done with the project. But it should be a demonstration of your integration. The paper, if it began with a case study, moved to a description of these analytical processes, beginning with your logic model theory of change discussion, then helped us understand what principles you selected and why you selected them, and how that deduced into 7 to 12 interview questions, how the interview went, and what the results were from the interview, and then attaching all the exhibits that you would have used to put that together. Then you finished a paper. That's what I'm hoping for. Its purpose for you is that you would become the kind of leader that sees what's hiding in plain sight, that you know that things are not as they appear to be, but they are as they are, as we have them interpreted for us by those who are closest to the challenge. So let's talk about this more in the classroom. What is this? Using the words form, function, and meaning, how would you answer? What is this? Its form is a white orb of some kind. It's a round, that's the form of it. Solid. There's a hole drilled through it, so it's hollow now. That's its form. What's its function? Well, it won't bounce like a basketball, so that's not its function. If I pour some liquid in it, it's going to spill out the bottom, so it's not a cup or a bowl or anything. I wonder what its function is. Oh, I know. Maybe it's to put baby chicks inside of. This is an ostrich egg. What's its meaning? Depends if you're asking the ostrich or you're asking the guy who bought it in Nairobi a couple years ago. Those first 2 dimensions of that artifact, we could fairly easily engage a debate, and using the factual evidence, we might not prefer the semantics by virtue of who we are culturally, but given what is there, we could include that is probably something like an orb or an oval. It's white. It's made of semi-porous material. It's got mass and matter to it. It's hollow. We could come to some agreements on just the observational evidence. We could go to the next stage and say, what's its function? And conclude all sorts of functions. I happen to have it in this basket of straw, and it sits on a shelf not far from where I'm seated. So it may have a decorative function. It may be, the obvious function is eggs are for things to be born. It's part of the reproductive process. But its meaning, how are you going to find out what its meaning is? If you decide from your side of the screen what the meaning is, guess what? You're already wrong, because the only way you can know what it means is you have to talk to the person for whom it means something. You have to ask me. Form and function, That's the purview of everyone outside of me. But if you want to know what it means, for me, it's for me to remember women who were dying of HIV and who were left, the formerly prostitutes, left to die, who had been drawn in from a ministry organization and given a new chance through sewing and creating artistic crafts and products that others would find valuable. And that home for these women and their children touched my heart when I was visiting, and I wanted to some way symbolize that life can be that hard and hope can be found in some hard places. And the symbol of African life seemed to get reduced down to this particular ostrich egg, and I was happy to give the resources I had to their gift shop so that those women would have electricity and food for what they were trying to do. Form, function, meaning. I really don't know what the Nations Church is doing, but I can see its form. I can see the function of those buildings and cafes and parking lots, those sort of things. Its meaning, I'm still stuck until I go and ask them and begin getting interpretation of the evidences that I've begun to collect.